We hope listening to our podcast makes you feel more connected to our city and to your fellow Nashvillians. And we want to hear from you, too. The Nashville Banner is running an audience survey right now, and we'd love to get your take on our coverage, what we're getting right, and what you want more of. It takes just 5 minutes and will help shape local journalism in town for years to come. You'll find a link to the survey at NashvilleBanner.com. Thanks so much for being part of this. No matter where you lived, if your house had a television on January 23rd of 1977, chances are it was tuned to ABC that night to catch the first of 8 consecutive episodes of Roots. To call the series risky and bold is true. To call it groundbreaking now seems an understatement. Half the population of America watched. Longtime journalist Lucas Johnson, who covered Tennessee's Capitol Hill for the AP for decades, is marking the 50th anniversary of the publication of Alex Haley's book with his own collection of essays and interpretations proving its seismic cultural impact. The book is called Remembering Roots: How an American Classic Transformed the World. Whoever was adapting it for the small screen was searching for this heart of gold Caucasian character that they could drop in where all white people weren't evil. And was that by design? And how did Haley feel about that? Was that messing with the narrative?
I don't know how he felt about it, but I think he went along with what Warner Brothers wanted to get it done. But yes, that was, if you remember, there were like the fathers back then. You had like the Brady Bunch father, you had Lauren Green from Bonanza, and you had others you had the Riflemen. They were all, brought in to make it a little bit more palatable. But whatever it did, it worked. I think people still, maybe that brought in more people to watch it, but it worked.
So what changed after Roots, and what hasn't? And why in the world was the book banned recently in our own state, where the famous author grew up? I'm Demetria Kaladimos. It's Banner and Company. Well, Lucas, welcome.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely.
I'm looking forward to it.
You know, long ago when TV was like your fireplace and everyone sat there and watched live at the same time, our family was riveted to Roots. I was a senior in high school. I might add an all-white high school in suburban Chicago. Jimmy Carter had just been inaugurated, I think 3 days prior. He pardoned all the Vietnam draft evaders, so that was big news. But no one was talking about anything else except Roots.
Yeah.
Where were you in 77? How old were you?
Oh, I was 8 years old. Yeah, I was 8 years old. And I still remember bits and pieces of it. I remember sitting there with my mom and my dad, because I think at the time my 2 sisters, I think they were away. They were in college. But I remember just certain scenes that just stuck with me. I think the one that really just riveted me right away was the one where they did finally catch Kunta Kinte, and just how he was just in such a rage when he got the chains on him, and he was trying to get out of it, and he couldn't. But then he just was frustrated and just to the point where he just collapsed because just from just being tired. But I just thought how crazy that was to see that. And I think it kind of just gave me the first understanding of being, captured, and just the horror that starts. That was just the beginning of stuff.
Yeah.
But it was that image just kind of stayed with me.
Did your mom and dad prepare you for what you were watching? Did you think this was significant in any way?
They didn't, but there were oohs and ahs, from them. And I remember one of my friends, he would talk about how his mother, like, during commercial, or she would give commentary, about it. And I think that was what was so important at that time too, that I think relates to today, which is why I think, Roots is still important, is because back then there was commentary, there was discussion, even in that small area. But I think it was about what was happening, and I think that today can still be utilized, that same conversation when it comes to slavery in particular, about, what's happening, why it happened. This is a part of American history. Yes, it's horrific, but it's something that happened, and it's something that, we don't want to go back to. It's just a sign of, and we know that it won't go back to that exactly, but it's the hatred that was perpetuated, and how that's an example of how we should just really try to treat one another better.
Yeah. So 7-8-year-old Lucas sees this epic event, and then you go on to become a journalist and writer.
Yeah.
When did you encounter the book, the Alex Haley book?
It was when I was in probably college, to be quite honest, because I didn't know a lot about Alex Haley. I did an internship at the St. Petersburg Times, and the man at the time who brought me on, Ben Johnson, actually knew Alex Haley. And I remember when Alex Haley passed, he wrote a commentary about him. But it wasn't until I really knew more about Alex Haley, was when I did a story about his childhood friend, Fred Montgomery, who grew up with Alex Haley. And it turns out he had planned to write a book about Fred Montgomery, but he died before doing it. And so I ended up doing that project from my own perspective, and titled it Finding the Good, because Alex Haley had a saying, find the good and praise it. But it was through Mr. Montgomery that I learned so much more about Alex Haley, what it was like with him growing up in the Jim Crow era and segregation, and just more about how he came to write Roots and how he did it. Because sometimes Mr. Montgomery would be with him when he would do his traveling. He would be on like cargo ships, freighters, because he thought they were quieter. And so he would write at those times. And so they were like, good friends. And so he invited him to come along. And so he would tell me stories like that. But that's how I really got to know him. And then it just, some of the stuff I remembered about Roots too, that again, just stayed with me.
Alex Haley already was a pretty famous author by the time Roots came around for the autobiography of Malcolm X.
Yes.
How did he get that gig?
From what I understand, I believe, he had an agent at the time, but I believe he had already been writing stories. He had written a piece about Malcolm X for Reader's Digest. I think he also did something for Playboy, but he got to know him then, and it took a while for Malcolm X to trust him, but eventually he did enough to be able to write the autobiography of Malcolm X, to tell his story. And I remember Alex Haley, when I was reading some of his other articles that he wrote and some of his commentary, he talked about just how particular, Malcolm X was, and, and everything was written by hand. I think he did end up typing some stuff eventually, but, they got it done.
The storyteller, or griot in African society, is probably as important a figurehead as the chief or the chieftain.
Yeah.
And Haley knew that. And do you think Haley knew that he would become that?
I don't think he knew. I don't think he really, from what I understand from talking to his grandson too, I don't think he expected Roots to be as big as it was. I think he thought it would do well, but like so many other people, I don't think he expected it to just explode like it did. But that's one of the elements that I do love about Roots is the storytelling, and how that just transcends so much. It transcends race. It transcends so many other things. And it's something that I think all of us, have a story to tell. And I think Alex Haley emphasized that, whether it's, your family history or just, your personal history.
How did you pick the people to include in your book? There are essays and recollections from all kinds of people and great insights.
Yeah.
It had to be a long list of folks, and did anyone get left out?
I knew there were some main people that I wanted, and I got those right away. And the others were just individuals that I would just be having a casual conversation with. And I knew I wanted, like, of course, educators and a cross section, but they all seemed to have a story. They had something to say about roots, and they were enthusiastic about it, which their enthusiasm, helped me, which is what kind of just drove me even more to complete the project, which, at times it was basically a labor of love, but it was something that as I listened to these stories about roots, I got more and more engrossed and more excited and more energized to get the project done.
How vivid were their memories? I mean, it's been, like we said, almost 50 years since the TV series, 50 years since the book, yet people recall almost every shot in some cases.
Yeah, and what was really good question. They remember being, a lot of them seeing it for the first time and being, in the TV, usually with the family members. But there was one gentleman who the behold scene where you lift up, the child is lifted up, and of course, Amaro Kunta Kinte's father says, "Behold, the only thing greater than yourself."
And that huge starry sky.
Yes, starry sky. And there was one gentleman was like, I did that. We were just having a casual conversation, and then he starts going into, he did that with a daughter. He said, like, when I have my first child, I'm going to do that. So he did it with his daughter. And then when he had his son, he did the same thing. And I was able to talk to the son and daughter and get their perspective and how much they appreciated that. Their father thinking of them enough to do that, but also the tie to the ancestry, the tie to something greater than themselves. And that stuck with them all their lives. And one is 43 and the other is probably a little bit older.
And of course, later in The Lion King, the animated Disney classic, what does the lion Mufasa do?
And that's the result of roots. Yeah.
Also, jumping the broom.
Yeah.
Did anyone really know about that until that came out?
I think, and just like the holding up of the child is a African ritual, but Alex Haley brought it to everybody's attention because a lot of people didn't know that. And then jumping the broom, yes, that was something that I think was known, but it wasn't well known. And that's why, again, Roots brought so many of those things to everybody's, living room.
Yeah. And you point out that the subtitle of Roots is
The Saga of an American Family, which again, I think he intended it to be something for everybody. Family is a major theme throughout Roots. And I think that that's something that we can all connect with.
And we can talk forever. So many things changed after Roots. People got into where did I come from?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think Ancestry.com, certainly there were no commercials for it, and I don't know if it even existed as an entity before then.
No, it didn't. The only one, it's Family, I can't think of the name exactly, but it was around when Alex Haley was there. And actually, I talked to some of the genealogists, one of the senior genealogists there. And he mentioned that Alex Haley actually said if he had known about it, he may have utilized it. But Alex Haley just went old school, going through, ciphering, the clippings and scrolling and through the microfiche film to find out, his roots. But no, I don't think, definitely Ancestry, Finding Your Roots with Henry Louis Gates, he has acknowledged that Alex Haley motivated him, Roots motivated him to do that show.
Yeah, it's in the title of the show after all.
Yeah, exactly. It's a tribute to Roots.
And I was curious, the term African American came into vogue probably a little bit later in the 80s through Jesse Jackson, but I'm thinking that would not have been widely embraced.
No, it would. And I think as a result, again, of Roots and then making that transition, they became African Americans. Before they were Africans, but coming to America, African Americans. So,
talk a little bit about the actual television miniseries. It was 8 consecutive nights. Mm-hmm. It was risky. because nothing like that had ever happened. And I know you've talked to the producer's son.
Yeah, Mark Wahlberg. Of course, as you know, like more than 130 million people saw it, the original one. And what was going on at the time, there was a storm, a winter storm, that it kind of paralyzed half the country. So people really were in, where they were. And so they watched TV. And then granted, it was on just, maybe one of the main stations, one of 3 main stations. But I think after that first episode, regardless of what was going on, regardless of the storm, I think people were just drawn in and they wanted to see more because nobody had really seen how slavery was depicted, brought to life the way Roots did, with such colorful characters, like Cicely Tyson playing Kunta's mother, Maya Angelou playing his grandmother, and so many other characters. Louis Gossett playing Fiddler.
Chicken George.
Chicken George, Ben Vereen, who I talked to for the book, and he sounds still like Chicken George, still lively at 80. And of course, LeVar Burton, who I finally got, busy guy, but we talked for almost an hour, and he addressed every question that I had. So I'm so grateful to him for his time.
And you were telling me that he wasn't the runaway first choice for Kunta.
No, Hilly Hicks, who I also talked to for the book, who played Louis, one of Chicken George's sons, he was really, he and Ernest Pugh from What's Happening Now, or What's Happening, were, along with LeVar Burton, cast, but LeVar Burton got the role. But all of them still ended up being in there. And actually, there were 2 other characters. Well, one other character who was also, along with LeVar, ended up, this is a bit of trivia, going to Star Trek. Avery Brooks was in Roots, and he went on to play in Star Trek for some years, along with LeVar Burton as well.
It seems, though, and a lot has been written about this, but it's true, that whoever was adapting it for the small screen was searching for this heart of gold Caucasian character that they could drop in, where all white people weren't evil. And was that by design? And how did Haley feel about that? Was that messing with the narrative?
I don't know how he felt about it, but I think he went along with what Warner Brothers wanted to get it done. But yes, that was, there were like the fathers back then. You had like the Brady Bunch father, you had Lauren Green from Bonanza, and you had others you had the Riflemen. They were all, brought in to make it a little bit more palatable. But whatever it did, it worked. I think people still, maybe that brought in more people to watch it, but it worked.
It's Banner and Company. I'm Demetria Kaladimos, and we'll be right back. When we launched Banner and Company more than a year ago, we wanted to help you get to know your Nashville neighbors. One of the best ways to know a neighborhood is to tap into the experience of a realtor or two who really know the city and the region. Richard Courtney and Lisa Peebles are a pair to draw to, as they say. Kind of like matchmakers, they have the experience and relationships to connect you with people and homes that best serve your personality and your lifestyle. And with more than $1 billion sold, you can bet you'll be in good company. To connect with Richard Courtney and Lisa Peebles, visit NashvilleLuxuryEstates.com. In 2022, here in Tennessee, Roots was named one of our official state books.
Yeah.
Kind of a long list, but that was certainly an honor. And then we turn around this year, And we've got a county in East Tennessee that actually banned roots. Could you believe your ears?
No, I couldn't. And I believe it was 2022 was the law that was passed that they used to ban it, and then it was in 2024 when the lawmakers passed it to make it an official state book.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, along with 9 other works, but still. The main sponsor of the bill called Roots a masterpiece and said there was no way that you could overlook Alex Haley and Roots when we were looking at, what Native Americans, what Tennesseans to recognize, and that Roots, stands out. But yes, when I heard about that and the reason that they wanted to ban it, I was like, did they not know that it just became an official state book recently? How can you ban it and just take it off the shelves when it's been made official? And so I'm thinking that may have been the reason or part of the reason that they decided to reverse their decision.
Pretty quickly. And I'm so glad they did. But the other thing that I thought came out of that was that it just showed again how impactful Roots is when you look 50 years after it came out, when you look at the number of people from just across America, from Hollywood, all walks of life, that came out and said, how can you ban this? We're talking about like just Knox County. But people across basically the world knew it immediately. I mean, The Guardian picked it up right away. And there were just so many people that were just so supportive, not just of Roots, but of, just people being able to read, what they should want to read. Yeah. You mentioned the one fellow who had, held up his own child. What other impressions did you get from people that stand out from the book? Give us some of those stories.
Well, David Wolper's son, Mark Wolper, who did the remake of Roots in 2016, he let his kids watch Roots, the original one, and he just wanted to get like the reaction. And like one of his son, the other kids left. The other son kind of stayed, and he was like, Dad, I get it. He's like, it's like your music. I know you like rock and roll, but it's just not something I can really relate to. And so he thought that he needed to do something after so many people asking him to remake Roots, and he telling them no because he thought that, how can you remake something so great?
Right.
But he wanted to do something that might relate to another generation. And that's why he remade it, even though it may not be as good as the original, but he remade it with new actors, more identifiable actors of that generation at the time so that people might be able to relate to.
Okay. I remember slightly the remake because it did not connect with me the way the first one did.
Yeah.
Did they take other liberties with the story?
They did. At the end, they tried to keep it close, but I don't know whether for budget reasons or whatever, but Hollywood has a tendency to be creative in their own way. I think it wasn't, in my opinion, as good as the first one. I think that it was good to see new characters. Like it was good to see Forrest Whitaker playing Fiddler, but he wasn't Louis Gossett.
Yeah.
That
there
Fiddler.
Never will be another.
Never will be.
And you noted that there was some ad-libbing going on.
Yes. I mean, I don't know if many people know this. It's come out some, but when Kunta is cut down, finally, after being whipped, and Louis Gossett cradles him, and he's putting water on his face, and he says, "Don't you care what that white man say? You know who you be." And then he says, "There's going to be another day. There's going to be another day." That wasn't scripted. And so the directors just let him continue on. But I later found out, and I found some old footage where Alex Haley is talking about this, because he was on the set, and he was saying how Louis Gossett just kind of went into this trance, so to speak. Afterwards, he had to go off set just to kind of calm down and come back before he could do the next scene, because he was just so in this just state of just kind of just being taken over almost.
I can't imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, but the thing about it was the other people on the set, like one of the characters that I talked to was there, and they felt it, and how emotional it was. It was just like the ancestors being there, at that moment. And that was another scene that stayed with me when you were asking earlier, because it just symbolized just a father or a mentor being there for someone who needs them. And that's kind of the way things are today when it comes to, a young man and an older man being there, that father figure in so many ways to kind of help guide them.
It's Banner and Company, and my guest is journalist Lucas Johnson, who's written Remembering Roots, How an American Classic Transformed the World. And we'll be right back. Dr. Ray Winbush, who I remember from his time at Fisk, says of your book, let it both be a guide and a challenge. Do you see it that way?
Yes, and I challenge people to look. One of the things I'll say this, and it ties into what you're asking, like in the afterward, I look for ways to promote unity, because Alex Haley talked about that in some of his writings. Yeah, we've been through the slavery thing, but what can we do now to work together to be more civil toward one another? And that's how Alex Haley kind of captured it too, the civility. And that's come out in some moments that we've had in our history, like with the assassination of Charlie Kirk and the Spencer Cox, governor of Utah, coming out and saying this is a watershed moment for America. What can we do? Should we get off the off-ramp? What can we do now to look at one another and try to work better? And I talk about that in the afterward. But I think that's kind of what Alex Haley wanted too with Roots. He wanted people to find a connection in some kind of way. And I think family was it. He talked about the number of people after Roots, like the white people would come up to him and say, thank you so much for not making me feel guilty, but teaching me about Africa, teaching me about history. They could have felt guilty about the slavery and what happened, but they didn't. They saw it in a different light. And I think that's what he really wanted. And his grandson says the same thing.
There are so many placards and things being taken down and corrected at state parks and monuments and so forth. Could Roots make it today?
It almost didn't. You talked about the Knoxville, the banning. I think that's an example. I had a friend who sent me an email, and he was like, whew, when they reversed it. But he said it's not over yet. And there was an article that kind of alluded to that. There's going to be attempts. But I talked to one of the people that gave me commentary was Blair Underwood, and he was adamant in this statement. He said, we will not be erased. And I think that's the case with the history, that things that they want to erase, they won't be able to.
The book itself, Roots, and again, the book was 1976, the series was 1977. So we almost have dual 50th anniversaries.
Yeah.
It was characterized as historical fiction, what some later termed faction.
Yeah.
Like Truman Capote's In Cold Blood.
Exactly.
Do you agree with that characterization? I mean, was there some, I hesitate to say embellishment, but was there some fiction or imagination rolled in?
Yes, and Henry Louis Gates actually talks about that, and he says that that is one of the criticisms of it. But he said that imagination, as you can see now, the impact that it's had. I mean, the labeling could have been better. Even the publisher acknowledges that they could have now, after the fact. As I pointed out in Professor Norell's book, he talked to some of the people from there, the publishers that were still alive, and they admitted that they could have labeled it better so there wouldn't be any confusion. But I don't think that tarnishes at all the impact of Roots, and we see that now. It's transcended that. I mean, he created, imagination or not, something that people 50 years later, and maybe years down the road, decades down the road, I'm thinking people will still talk about Roots. I mean, there hasn't been anything like it still on TV. Amistad maybe came close. There have been stories about slavery, 12 Years a Slave, but nothing like Roots just really connected. And again, I think it was the characters that he was able to, that Warner Brothers were able to develop, that still are talked about today, like Chicken George and Kizzy, and of course, Kunta, and just characters that people are ingrained in people's minds. Yeah. Alex Haley did that.
What remains of? I know there's a museum interpretive center at his childhood home in
Yes.
Henning.
Yeah.
What's there when you go visit, and is it worth it?
It's worth it. And thank you to Senator Alexander, who at the time made sure that they would be turned into a more modern day museum. And so that's when the interpretive center, before it was just the Alex Haley home. And by the way, Alex Haley is actually buried in the front yard of the Alex Haley of the house. His
I
boy
had
at
no
home.
idea.
Yeah, but the interpretive center is in the back, and it's got the kiosks, it's got like the exhibits, as if you went to any modern day museum. It's on a much smaller scale, but it's definitely worth stopping off if you go into Memphis. It's about 30 miles outside of Memphis, but it's worth going there. And the curators, the overseers that give the stories are great.
Yeah. How long did it take him to write it? And you were telling me how it ended.
Oh, I think it took about 12 years. I think it took to do the research. And, I think he drug his feet a little bit for whatever, reasons. But it did take a toll on him. But he finally got it done. And I think he was at a cafe in New York, and he wrote like the last two sentences of the book on a paper napkin. And then he and one of the individuals that was helping him to pull it together, they took it over to Doubleday. They walked it over at that time in the snow and gave it and it was so funny because the person that assisted him, who was his widow, Ma Haley, said that the editors at Doubleday had been on Alex Haley so much to get it done that he hid behind a plant. And she was the one that took it and gave it to the editor. And the editor started kind of flipping through it immediately and was happy. But yeah, he finally got it done. And it was such a relief. But in doing more research, I found out what a burden it was at times because to get it done. And that's why I too wanted to do something to commemorate it because it was a lot that he went through. And maybe at some points it almost didn't even get done, but it did.
Yeah. You've written a couple of books now. Can you imagine spending 12 years on one?
No, but that's the other thing too. I mean, he took all that time and thanks to Reader's Digest that supported a lot of his research because he was an editor there, but they funded a lot of the research of him going to Africa, to Gambia, especially to Gambia, to where he finally made that connection with the griot that gave him the information of his ancestors to kind of connect the dots, so to speak. And I think when he went to Gambia and found that out, that's when he could really start writing, and that's when he did. I think that energized him after doing that. Because before he was just lecturing, like when he was at Hamilton College, that's how he would try to raise money too, to travel by going to different places. But in doing so and talking about roots, while he was trying to raise money, he was also spreading the word. And so people were fascinated. They were like, okay, what is this? I can't wait to maybe. And I think part of that too was like a build up. Maybe when the book finally came out, he had been talking about it so much in these lectures and different people had heard about it that when it came out, they couldn't wait to get it.
Yeah. I think in the book, well, you talk about one of my friends, Henry Giles, who teaches at UT Martin.
Yeah.
And actually developed a course on it?
Absolutely. And I'm so grateful to Professor Giles for taking the time to talk to me. But I couldn't believe that was one of those moments, too, when I was writing the book, like, wow, okay, I know I'm on the right track. Because I didn't know, really, that she had done that. And we're just having a conversation. And then I tell her what I'm doing. And then she tells me, well, I've got this curriculum here. And she allowed me to talk to some of her students because I wanted to get the commentary from a younger group. Mm-hmm. And so I was able to get like 2 or 3 of her students that gave me commentary about how they felt about the class. And it was just so interesting to hear how they were probably seeing roots for the first time, but they enjoyed it. They welcomed it. They wanted to know more about this history. And I'm hoping that other young people too, I mean, because what it does is it sparks conversation. I think when you try to ban that, take that away, it stifles an opportunity to educate. And that's the most important thing. That's hurtful. And I think you want to be able to talk about these things and have meaningful conversations, which is why I created a reading and discussion guide to accompany the book, so that book clubs and classrooms can have these discussions and ask these certain questions just to broaden things and create understanding.
I know at some point in time there was a suit brought against Mr. Haley.
Yeah. There were a couple.
Did that turn into anything?
No,
I know
and
one had to be settled, but talk about that.
One was thrown out, and the reason he settled the other one was against his lawyer's wishes, but Roots: The Next Generation was being filmed, and he wanted to be on set. He was just tired of the whole drama and court stuff, so he was like, let's just settle. And that's why he settled the other one, but both of them could have been done away with.
This was a plagiarism claim, was it more of the picture he was painting of Africa at the time, or it wasn't specific characters, was it?
Henry Louis Gates had said that Alex Haley suffered from Roots envy, and that was from other scholars who had maybe written about it, but didn't get the attention that Roots got. And so they were jealous to a certain degree. The other thing was Alex did have some people, maybe students possibly, not so much doing a lot of the research, but just helping out. And I think something may have slipped in that shouldn't have. And I think that's part of the reason, too, why he went ahead and settled. Because he had a lot of stuff going on. I don't think, he probably wasn't the most organized from what I hear, papers everywhere. And that's where the person that helped him kind of finish it up helped him get more organized. So, but it was nothing intentional. I do know that if I'm talking to his grandson, who's, in tune with everything that's happened. But I do know, as far as those lawsuits go, one was thrown out and the other one could have been. But he wanted to just go ahead and sell it, squash it.
Yeah.
For I think $600,000.
Wow.
Which today would have been like $1.2 million, I think.
But the man's forever known for this work.
Yes.
And his family is too. Do they feel a great responsibility to make sure that it remains in the wider conversation? They
do. His son is doing a lot of stuff, not just in the United States, but in Gambia as well, to kind of promote not just more so the legacy of his father, but in ways that provides better housing, better education, things like that for individuals over there.
Well, we talked a lot about Alex. We didn't talk very much about Lucas, but let me ask you, what are you doing now after 20 plus years at the AP and covering Tennessee politics and writing this book? What's next?
Mainly communication strategist, but also doing freelance writing. And I am looking into another book project, hoping to get some interest in it. But just continue to tell stories. I think, and I will say this, everybody has a story. Don't think that you don't. I'm always encouraging, if I talk to a class or just people in general, journal, write stuff down. The other thing that I'm hoping will come from Roots, I know Alex Haley wanted this, talk to your elders. If you have an opportunity, you don't have to go all the way back, like generations, but just talk to mom and dad. Start out with them. What was it like when you guys were growing up? Talk to your grandparents. And then with the grandparents, if there is, and not just a grandparent, if there's an elder person that has a great story, take a digital recorder and record that person, or a phone. Record that, because, life is short for all of us. But, you really want that information from them. And what better way to have it their own voice? And it's so easy to do. Like, you can just do it with your phone. And but do that. I encourage that so much.
Oh, I will ditto that, because after talking to so many people over the years, what I really wish I had done was sit my parents down and do a long video interview. So if you're listening out there and it's a rainy afternoon or a snowy one, get your own family history started.
Absolutely.
Banner & Company is a production of the New Nashville Banner. This episode is produced by Steve Harouche and edited by me. The original music is by Verlin Thompson. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or go to NashvilleBanner.com. You're in good company. Our little tradition here on Banner and Company is that the last question is in the fishbowl.
Oh, okay.
That's what you saw me tucking in there.
Okay.
So it's kind of a crapshoot.
Let me
But
get my glasses on.
did I see reading glasses come out?
Yeah, I've got to have these. I'm not getting any younger. Let's see. From Audrey Schulman.
Who is the person who's had the most profound impact on your life?
Probably my grandfather, Leroy Johnson. He was a farmer, but little means, but he found a way to make ends meet and provide for his family, 6 kids, and handled everything. There were times when he had to deal with racism, but he handled it in a gentleman way, very kind still. He and his wife, Gladys, had a general store, a family store, and they would, provide for the community from, the vegetable garden, from the fields and stuff like that. But I just liked the way he carried himself throughout all of that. And again, that's just an example of someone close to you that, and I wish, I was younger at the time, I talked to him and I did write about him in my first book, but I wish I could have had an opportunity to record him and just hear what he had to say. But I would say Leroy Johnson played.
How long did he live?
He lived to be 83.